Hi there, welcome to this seminar or webinar dialogue called Enlightenment for Atheists. If you don't know me, my name is Nick Jankel. I am an author and practical philosopher, and I've just released a book called Spiritual Atheist. And this seminar is a kind of distillation of the most important ideas from the book. It's unplugged, it's live, it's dynamic. Things may go wrong. I may and ah. I'm not going to stop it. I'm not going to edit. It's just live and direct insights and ideas from myself. So, enlightenment for atheists. It's almost like a paradox, an oxymoron, some people think. And I guess I'm here to say absolutely not. Not only is it not an oxymoron, though it is a creative tension, it's probably the most important idea or thought that I know of, and I think the most important issue for the world today. And I'll go on to explain some more about that at the end of the seminar. First of all, let's talk about what Enlightenment for Atheists is about. So it's about understanding who we are and what our place is in the world, which are questions that most people ask at some point in their life. I've been asking them since about the age of 15 in a really concerted and focused way. And all of us, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, operate our life from what the Greeks, or some of the Greeks, called a bios, the same root as the word biology, which means a philosophy for life. It's not just a philosophy that we have in academia, in university, in ivory towers, a philosophy for life. Beliefs, assumptions, ideas. A lot of them are based upon our past experience. A lot of them are based upon our emotional experiences of growing up. And depending on what bios we operate from, we will make different choices about what we do with our life, how we spend our money, what we do with our kids, kind of schools we put them in, the kind of people we attract and want to be in relationships with, in friendships with, the kind of company we work for, the kind of company we create, kind of products and services we sell, the kind of politics that we believe in, and the people we vote for. The challenge is most people's bios is there by default, it's not there by design. And I think the point of philosophy, the most important point of philosophy, is to find our bios for ourselves, so we thrive in our life, so we thrive in love, and so we thrive in leadership. And that's what I'm here to share a little bit about, the bios that I've come to call spiritual atheism, which is premised upon the idea that people who are atheists, like myself, can find a different form of atheism from the one that's out there, mainstream conventional atheism, which I call conventional atheism, which is centered upon an experience that many of the wisdom traditions, so whether it's Buddhism or Taoism, or some of the mystical traditions from the West, like Kabbalah, Sufism, Christian mysticism, call variously something around the idea of enlightenment. This is not the Enlightenment as it was known, the birth of reason, the birth of science in the West. That's the Enlightenment. This is just enlightenment, or spiritual enlightenment, or mystical enlightenment. And for many years I thought this wasn't a thing. I discarded it along with religion. I was never into New Age stuff, and pretty much still aren't. And so when I decided not to be religious at the age of 15, in a quite technicolor display of atheism by giving a speech, a sermon at the synagogue that I was up to that point a member, about atheism, or rather how crazy the idea of God is, I discarded all religion, and I thought the only thing I can trust is science. Now, even though I still am a card-carrying member of the Atheist Party, I have come to experience religion with a slightly more positive viewpoint, but I still don't believe in a God, a personal God, someone who you can pray to, someone who does stuff for you. I don't believe in priests. I don't believe in anyone having any access to something special that I don't have access to. I don't believe in rules and dogma and scripture, that some book or some text has somehow got everything in it that you need to know, some direct revelation of God. I don't believe in many rituals, particularly those that are based upon things from a long time ago that may have made sense then, but they don't make much sense now. So that for me was a big no for religion. The one thing I have to say, I do find religion more and more positive, particularly when you see how much challenges some of contemporary spirituality has with people just acting really immorally and unethically, is that religion does have a quite strong focus on an ethical fibre. And in fact, many of the religious traditions say before you get into crazy stuff like Enlightenment and mysticism, you really have to develop a really solid moral fibre. And that usually happens within a very solid community. So that's really positive stuff. But I still ripped up the religious book, and I still do. Don't believe in religion. So I then decided, okay, if the religion is not the thing, then atheism must be the thing. And I, like many other people, got drawn into a sense of atheism that I don't believe is actually necessarily accurate. And this atheism has become popular in the last 10, 20 years with a bunch of philosophers called the New Atheists. And really what has happened is atheism's gone from saying, I don't believe in a God, I don't believe in religion, to saying, I actually believe only in what science can prove. And this is a massive mistake, philosophical error, ideological error. And I think it's really important to understand how that has come about. So I was very lucky to study the history of science and the philosophy of science, as well as science itself. And if you go back in time to around the time Galileo was discovering the moons of Jupiter with his invention, or the improvement on the telescope that he developed, he started to realize that science, as in the study of matter, material things, atoms, molecules, moons, only can really make progress, only really make sense if you get rid of what he called the secondary qualities, which we might call our conscious experiences, because they start to cloud things and distort things. They're biases which get in the way of the pure discovery of what nature says through the measurement of things. So Galileo didn't say that those secondary qualities don't exist. He didn't say they're not important. He didn't say love and peace and the experience of connection with your child or your friend or your lover or your team or your brand is not important or doesn't exist. He just said we need to separate the world into these two things. Primary properties, which are things you can measure in material. Outside there, I could look through my eyes, whether it's quarks, tiny things, or whether it's space-time, massive, huge things. Only things we can measure. Over the centuries since Galileo distinguished these two types of things, what seems to have happened is scientists have said, well, actually, the only thing that really exists to them is the matter, the primary properties. And those secondary qualities, which are really difficult to measure, they're really annoying, and they're really hard to make a science from, including the science of psychology, which just never seems to give us the results we really want, really proven absolute truths. We're just going to downgrade that whole area of life. And in fact, this new virulent form of atheism, new atheism, is really what I would call materialist atheism. It has basically said, not only is religion not true, not only is dogma and scripture untrue, and there is no God, but actually anything that you learn about the world that comes from inside your experience, your conscious experience, your inner experience, your subjectivity, your interiority, your feelings and your thoughts and your ideas, just don't really exist. And in fact, there's a couple of very respected philosophers of consciousness, philosophers of science, who are really dogmatic materialist atheists, who say even their own consciousness, the one that makes experiments happen, the one that interprets the results of experiments, the one that writes the books and that speaks the thoughts that make them famous on TV and in interviews, actually doesn't exist. It's an illusion. And that seems to make no sense to me from many different perspectives. But whether even it makes sense to you and whether you think that's actually the truth, the challenge we've got then is that we try and make big decisions about the world, about human beings particularly, based upon matter, what we can measure in matter, evidence, rather than a lot of what we feel. And so we've ended up in a world where our heart might know some things. I don't necessarily mean our biological heart, I mean our metaphorical heart, the feelings, the senses we have, the felt sense, the embodied experience we have of life. We have to ignore it in order to make things happen in matter that we think are proven by science, whether that's economic science, whether that's business science, whether that's consumer research, or whether it's just the promotion of profit, which is of course something you can measure in matter. Although obviously money is an ideology, it's a conscious thing, but we like to think it's something proven in matter. And what that has led to is us prioritizing profit over everything else. We prioritize what we can measure in things like medicine and mental health over people's experience. And then we end up making decisions, those important life decisions, based upon only one part of reality, the primary properties that science has been designed to engage with, not all the things that happen inside us, our subjective experience, our conscious experience, our consciousness, which is a bit crazy, if you ask me. And perhaps the most painful thing it's created, I believe, is a schism inside us between what our hearts feel and what our minds know. And if you're a modern person like I am, and like most people are, we live in a world where we have to constantly ignore our heart in order to obey logic and proof and reason and science in our mind. And this is extremely painful. And in fact, right now, so-called diseases of despair and deaths of despair, so that means deaths from suicide, from prescription drugs, from illegal drugs, from anxiety and depression leading to all sorts of outcomes that we don't even know, is arising in the two most advanced Anglo-Saxon economies, the UK and the US. Life expectancy is going down in the most progressive cultures and societies on earth. Not just that, but in the gap that's opened up in this materialist atheism, which just looks at measured things, is a loss of meaning and a sense of despair and nihilism. And in that gap, you get loads of crazy stuff coming up. You get evangelical Christianity, Judaism, Islam arising, creating havoc in the Middle East, creating havoc in the US, creating havoc in Europe. You get political extremism, you get this right-wing extremism, but you also get left-wing extremism, and you get this identity politics where people focus their entire debate and argument on their identity, something usually in matter. So you end up with this world, which is the world we've got now. We've got all this progress measured scientifically, even if you discount the suicide levels of anxiety. The fastest growing illness in children in the UK is anxiety. So even if you think we've got GDP's growing and poverty is reducing, all this stuff in matter, most of our inner worlds are really not that happy. People aren't really thriving. Depression hits most people at some point, a sense of despair. And that pain can be exploited by all these extremists and is causing the political craziness that we're seeing across the world, whether it's in Hungary, whether it's in Sweden, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the US, and everywhere else as well. So, what I just thought to myself at some point in my late 20s, early 30s is, this atheism is not enough. This materialist atheism is not enough. I know there's something more to life than an empty, meaningless, random universe that happened to have me. I felt it in my soul. I felt it in my being. When I went to close my eyes, I didn't really know much about meditation at the time. When I closed my eyes and felt and thought, when I danced in Africa and in raves all over the world, in Burning Man, I felt connection with people. I felt what the Africans call Ubuntu. I felt a togetherness, a meaning between me and others. I felt I had some role to play in the world. So I went seriously hardcore in to experience that, to find that for myself. A lot of suffering accelerated it, burnout, entrepreneurial burnout, breakdown, emotional breakdown, relationship breakdown, business breakdown. And the results of about 15 years of hardcore deep diving into my inner experience is this idea that we can have a spiritual form of atheism. But that wasn't enough for me. I don't just think, okay, I felt it, I experienced it, I had a moment in that meditation or in that shamanic experience. It's all good. I'm also a rationalist. I'm still an atheist. I still believe in mind and ideas and theory and rigor, ultimately rigor. And so I've spent many, many, many years joining the dots between what science tells us about matter, whether it's our brain cells, whether it's quantum microtubules in those brain cells, whether it's our hormones, whether it's how emotions are made, whether it's behavioral science about how we can be nudged into different behaviors, and then what the wisdom traditions, which are the sciences, if you like, of inner consciousness, tell us about our inner experience over millennia of human experiment. They're a different form of science. They're not the same form of empirical, objective science where you split apart the subject, the matter you're experimenting with, and the object, subject, the scientist, and the object, the matter. They're an empathic science of experiencing meditation for yourself, then leading other people, experiencing it with them, getting in dialogue, sharing. And over many, many, many years, we've created these wisdom traditions. Buddhism is a big one. Taoism is a big one. But they're all over the world, indigenous traditions. And I've been triangulating and sort of creating a map of what they both tell us. And my absolute total belief is there are absolutely no contradictions between a truly open, curious, empirical science of primary properties and a truly open, curious, and rigorous contemplative science, wisdom science of our inner experience. They map absolutely, and literally every day I'm looking at scientific papers of neurology and emotional psychology, and it's just like, yeah, another dot joined, another dot joined, another dot joined all the time. It's phenomenal to see all this coming together. And indeed, my purpose of my life, I believe, is in part to be part of this conversation of weaving these together, of integrating them together. So the enlightenment I'm talking about, not the rational enlightenment, but the spiritual enlightenment. Different traditions have different words for it. But the most important thing to understand about that experience is it has to happen inside you. You can't read about it and understand it. You can't listen to a webinar like this and understand. You have to experience it. And in a minute, I'm going to do a little experience just to get us somewhere into that conversation. But the enlightenment for atheists that I believe is so important and will prove to any atheist that goes on the journey, and it can take weeks, months and years to get it and feel it and to embody it, is that when you experience that enlightenment, that sense of unity with all things, oneness, which is the real core of that experience, called non-duality, particularly in the Hindu tradition of Advaita Vedanta. There's not two things, not this and this, but only one thing. It's non-dual. When you experience that one thing and that you are part of that one thing, everything about life reorganizes around that. And so when I was at university studying the philosophy of science, I became very enamored by postmodernism and the criticism of science, and the criticism of all knowledge as forms of power that try and have power over people. And I used to think, okay, everything can be deconstructed. Every claim to knowledge, including science, can be deconstructed. Science is as much about a theory and ideology and beliefs and feelings of the scientist as it is nature. So therefore, there's no grand narratives anymore. There's no transcendent truths. There's nothing to base a life on, a moral life on. And that was a terrifying nihilistic experience which didn't sit well with me for many years. And what I discovered when I found enlightenment, the discovery of oneness, of unity, is it is a transcendent truth. It's the one thing I know can't be deconstructed because it doesn't happen in words. It doesn't happen in discourse. It doesn't happen in politics. It happens inside, and it has no power to upset or control anyone else. It's not an ideology that we use to exert power over others. It's an experience for ourselves that we might discover we want to teach and talk about, but it's something we discover in our bodies, and it is a transcendent truth that you can build a life on. And that's the best news I can give any atheist is here's something that you can build a life on. That doesn't mean you have to give up your atheism. You can still believe in no God. You can still believe in no religion and no dogma. And in fact, I do. And I include in that you can still believe in nothing to do with the New Age scene. So the New Age scene, the sort of contemporary spirituality, crystals and chakras and all that stuff, I don't know if that stuff is true. I just know you don't have to have any of it to experience enlightenment as an atheist. And for me, almost the entirety of the New Age scene is an aesthetic choice. So a choice, it's a design choice. It's not a moral or philosophical choice. And I don't have Buddha statues in my home. I don't have crystals. I don't do patchouli oil. I don't do a lot of that stuff from that scene. In fact, if anything, I choose contemporary design aesthetic clothes and furniture. Irrelevant, but definitely not New Age. But I'm an absolute committed teacher of this one truth and the experience we have inside us. And 10, 15, 20, 30 times a day, I return to that experience. This feeling of connection, which I believe in human terms we call love. It's a feeling of connection, experience of connection with everything, and we just call that love. And I return to that feeling. I allow it to open up my body, open up my heart, open up my mind. Whenever I'm feeling stuck or stressed out or irritated or angry, which happens all the time, I return to this enlightenment as an atheist, and then I act from that. I make that how I make choices, how I behave with my children and whatever. And it's an ongoing experience. It doesn't happen once. It's something you live into and unfold inside your being over many, 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 many years. So, in summary, so far, I believe that if you go inside yourself and find a practice, what's called a wisdom practice, a reconnection practice, and it could be meditation and it could be ecstatic dance. It could be both. It could be qigong. It could be walking up mountains, feeling the nature. It could be vision quests. It could be shamanic stuff. It could be medicine plants. It could be washing up in a mindful way. It could be holding your children. It could be any or all of those things, or different ones at different points in your life as you feel connected to them, drawn to them. But if you commit to that rigorously, like a scientist rigorously does experiments over and over again, and doesn't just stop at the first one, keep trying different ways of doing it, you will find this experience of enlightenment. I promise you, it is there, it's inside you, it's innate in you. Every human being has access to it. And when you discover that experience, everything suddenly makes sense. And this missing part of us, this conscious, interior feeling, heart stuff, suddenly comes into power within us. It gets activated. And then we can integrate it with everything we love about science and modernity and progress and all these wonderful things that we love. And we can bring them together inside us. And that's what this talk is about, what this book is about. It's about bringing them together. Not making one better than the other. Not saying, well, as some New Agers do, well, consciousness is more important than matter. Only consciousness is true, matter is an illusion. That for me is just as dangerous as saying only matter is true and consciousness is an illusion. For me, they are innate in everything. There's a material part and a conscious part. If you look inside every bit of matter, if you could, there would be consciousness. Now, consciousness like we have, wise, aware, self-consciousness, I think only occurs in very complex bits of matter, particularly alive bits of matter. So I don't think a stone is necessarily conscious in the way we would experience it, but I think it has an interiority, a subjectivity. And so their consciousness is in everything and matter is in everything, and the two together make up this amazing reality. And we can only understand this crazy, amazing world when we understand both and when we honor both. And we look at science as the most rigorous way that human beings have ever found to understand what we can trust reliably and consistently about matter. And it could be this glass, the coffee inside it, electrons and rocks, metals, etc. And we look at the contemplative sciences, the wisdom traditions, as the best, most rigorous way, most consistent, reliable information we have about what happens inside us. And there's a reason why many great physicists have come into some form of mysticism as they get older. There's a reason why almost every wisdom tradition has some form of meditation or ecstatic dance. Ecstatic is a sort of hot burning off of our sense of separate individuality. And for me, meditation is a cooling off of our sense of separate individuality. And if we get cool through meditation or hot through ecstasy, we experience not this sense of me separate from everything, which usually leads us to feel like we lack things, that we're on our own, that we're lonely, that we don't have as much as that person, that we should probably compete with them to get more stuff that we don't feel we have because we're alone and we're separate. And we dissolve off that separation consciousness and we discover within connective consciousness, a sense of connection. And I believe we've all had that fleeting moments on a dance floor with a child, with your lover, in bed, making love. It's not called a little death for nothing in French, an orgasm. A little ego death is this feeling of connection, love, oneness, or truth. It gets called different things. But this connective consciousness is the key to then entering into a wise form of atheism, a conscious form of atheism. I happen to call it spiritual atheism as a bit of a provocative term, but that's what we do. I chose for a sort of symbol of this philosophy, this bios, this life philosophy, a Mobius Strip, which is a crazy thing from science, and in fact I shall create one as we speak with a bit of spare paper. So here is a Mobius strip. This is a piece of paper. You can see this is unplugged, gnarly, unprepared. And what you do with the Mobius strip to create a Mobius strip is, rather than creating a strip and sticking it there and it's just got two sides and that's all very interesting, doesn't tell you much. So Mobius strip, all you do to make a Mobius strip is you twist one piece of the paper and then you stick it there. So in this metaphor, I want you to imagine that one side of the strip of paper is matter, and on the inside of all matter is consciousness. So you've got matter, consciousness in everything. And what you do in a Mobius strip, which is so beautiful, is you put your hand around and you put your finger on one bit of the strip and you just move your finger around the whole strip and it just keeps on going forever. There's an infinity sign on its side, and it's an infinite object made from an object that actually has two sides. So it has two sides, yet only one. And this is the paradox of our life. There's only one reality, not two, not mind and body. It's not duality. It's only one reality. It's a non-dual experience. Only one Mobius strip, but it's made up at all times of both consciousness, interiority, subjectivity, experience, and matter on the outside. Always together, always part of one thing. And that way you can live a spiritual life, but not a New Age necessarily life. If you want to, that's great. You can have all those statues and things and whatever you want to do. We don't need that. You can have an open-hearted and open-minded spiritual life with no ideology, no closure, like this path is the only path. You can explore different traditions and bring them together. Although, note for the wise, if you do explore different spiritual traditions and take a bit from each, make sure you don't miss out the really gnarly self-development, trauma healing and morality that they all demand at some point. It's very tempting just to take the good bits and miss out the self-work and becoming a genuinely more loving, more caring, more truthful person. But no ideology, no aesthetic choice, up to you what you choose. And you can also have a scientific love, a rational love of data and reason, as again, no ideology, not necessarily saying everything has to be matter, because, parenthesis, there is no proof in science that only matter exists. So materialism, if you make it the only thing you believe in, is actually just as ideological as Catholicism or Islam or any of these other traditional religions. It's a choice. It's not proven. It's utterly unprovable. And so no scientist in the world can ever prove that consciousness does exist or doesn't exist, because science as a lens, as a method, was not designed to understand consciousness. It was designed to understand matter. So no one can ever prove this for you. I can't prove this for you. You have to prove for yourself through experience, through embodiment, this enlightenment experience. So in a minute, I'll share how that spiritual atheistic belief, this Mobius strip-like life philosophy, can work practically in everyday life, in everyday work. But before that, I thought it would be enjoyable for us all to have a little experience. So I'm going to invite you to sit in some kind of position of dignity. You can do this anywhere, but probably not while driving. I might ask you to close your eyes if you want to. It's an invitation, you don't have to. So sit in some kind of position of dignity, and if you want to, close your eyes. And the reason why meditation asks us to close our eyes is very practical, because our visual processing parts of our brain take up an enormous amount of energy and attention. So when our eyes are open, we look at things, and that takes up all our attention, our awareness, and the things we're looking at are separate from us. They're material. So if you close your eyes, suddenly a lot of that awareness and attention bandwidth is made available to look inside at what we experience inside. So, first of all, if you're not used to this experience, just take a moment to feel your experience of this moment. The sensations of air on your skin, the sound of my voice inside your mind, any emotional feelings in your heart, in your gut, in your throat, in your pelvis. Feeling of your big toe right now on your right foot, or your heel of your left foot, or the back of your knee, your shoulder. What does it feel like to be consciously you, fully aware of your consciousness? So I invite you to really honour that, not deny it like we may have done as an atheist or a materialist. That's your gift that's been given to every one of us, is to have conscious experience. And that includes all sorts of emotions, spectrum, highs and lows, fear and joy. All of them are useful, I believe, but that's another story. So just have a moment to honour your conscious experience and the experiences that we have in consciousness of insights into other people, into our work, into systems, intuitions about what feels like is the right thing to do in that moment. And your creative ideas, which also exist in your consciousness, not in matter yet. And creativity in business or in work means turning those ideas in consciousness into things in matter. And that's the beauty of this dual aspect experience of life, consciousness and matter. You get to be a master at transforming insights, intuition and ideas into the world and solving problems. So just really honour that consciousness and experience it as true, as super true. You can't prove it's there, but it feels like it's really, really important and really, really urgent. And in that consciousness, you might have feelings of love, maybe for a parent or a sister or a child or a lover, friend, colleague. And that feels real too, right? You might have a sense of meaning about your life. And again, don't deny that. That's beautiful and amazing, the meaning of life, your life. You might have a sense of purpose. Again, don't deny it like the materialist would say, there's no purpose to life. Enjoy the sense that maybe there is a purpose that comes to do something to do with taking your conscious experience out into the material world. So now let's flip to the other side of the Mobius strip of experience and now feel matter. So you might even take your hands, keep your eyes closed if you want to, I would. Feeling your hands, feeling the flesh of your matter, of your body. Maybe touching something around you, the ground, the wall, or a table, a computer, whatever. This is matter too, right? It feels really important and real. It doesn't feel like an illusion like some of the idealists might say it is, some of the gurus. It feels real. Think about your brain and how somehow your brain is rendering your conscious experience. I don't think it's creating it. That's again something in the book, but not for now. But it's rendering experience. It's very powerful. There's brain cells. It's the most powerful organizing system we've ever discovered. This brain, and your flesh, your muscles that get you to stand up and sit down and touch someone and cuddle and kiss. Your gut right now churning away on some coffee, lunch, dinner, metabolizing matter into energy in your body, which can then fire up your ideas and your insights and your intuitions. Again, amazingly important. And now, if you can, feel how they both can exist together within you. What your heart feels right now to be true about life, and what your mind has known from evidence, from science, from data. And you can bring them both into play in every moment of your life. And you make choices from this creative tension between heart and mind, between love and between logic, between purpose for what you want to do with your life and your work and your business, and the need to make money and profit and make things happen and get stuff done and effectiveness. And fascinatingly, and I talk about a little bit in Spiritual Atheist, there's some amazing research coming out about these different brain networks. And I believe these different brain networks in our brain allow us to feel either this connective consciousness or separation consciousness, either creativity or control. And it's built into our brains. But that'll be the subject of my next book. So opening your eyes and returning to this moment, this webinar, wherever you are listening to this, watching this. And before I finish up, I just want to share how powerful this creative tension, this dual aspect understanding of consciousness and matter is in practice. Because I'm an atheist, I'm live in this world here. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an innovator, I'm a leadership person. I help leaders, organizations make changes in the world, entrepreneurs. So what does it all mean? Why is enlightenment so important for atheists? So let's just talk about ourselves first of all. Let's say you're having a mental health challenge. So if you're a materialist, you might go, well, my brain is just a machine. And so if I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling upset or angry or depressed, I'm going to blame it on broken machinery. I'm going to go to the doctor and get a pill. As someone who studied medicine with a view to being a psychiatrist, I can tell you that, and someone's personal experience of taking some of these mental health medicines, is that they can definitely help. But if we don't own our conscious experience of anxiety or happiness, and we constantly look just for the matter, my belief is it's very unlikely that we'll ever truly thrive. We might deal with life, we might just get through, we might survive, but we won't thrive, we won't feel joy and awe and bliss, and every moment can be full of joy and awe and bliss. But to do that, we have to take ownership that part of our reality might well be some broken or wonky machinery in our brain, but part of it most likely is also some wonky stuff in our feelings and our consciousness and our experience, probably from when we were a kid that we haven't ever resolved. We call that trauma of some kind. It doesn't have to be very dramatic. And the beginning of all spiritual atheism, the beginning of all transformational work and leadership work is to start with ourselves and start healing that trauma so we can start to become free. I was clinically depressed at one point in my life. I had fibromyalgia, chronic pain syndrome. I had anxiety and panic attacks. And I haven't had any of that stuff for over a decade because I've taken so much care over my own conscious experience. And I wanted to master it, not control it, master it. So I never got pulled down and sucked down by consciousness that I didn't understand. Essentially unconscious experience in my consciousness, in my experience, in my subjectivity. So that's the first step. Mental well-being and happiness, just being able to joy, but not some kind of atheist happiness that's like about just jolly stuff and whatever, feeling of pleasure. I'm talking about a sense of thriving in every moment of our life, even if we're going through the darkest stuff. And right now I'm going through some really dark stuff, but because I have a mastery over my conscious experience, I can use that stuff and I can metabolize the dark stuff. And realize it's not actually that dark because I can grow from it. I can heal stuff. And don't make you think, woo-woo new age with the word healing. The word healing comes from the root of the same word as wholeness. So for me, healing is becoming whole, becoming the person we were always meant to be before life in our childhood, in our early years got in the way and took us into a different direction. We became someone else just to survive. And we can start dissolving all those patterns or those defensive masks front and become who we really meant to be and experience awe on a daily basis, bliss on a daily basis. But we don't hang out in bliss because we don't addicted to the bliss. We can just get right back into the dark and the gnarly and thrive through all of it. Let's talk about something more, let's say, medical. So you have diagnosed with something serious, like I have been, cancer or heart disease, or you want to get an immunization for a child. So we will look at the evidence, right? We want to know what our doctors studied. We want to know their qualifications. We want to know what the research says. But, and this is so important, doctors don't have all the answers. No point trying to hope they do. They don't. They know they don't. A good doctor, a wise doctor knows they don't. And in fact, a lot of doctors are realizing that part of their job is about shifting consciousness, what the patient feels about themselves and their life, not just giving them pills or surgery. So if you do want to have an immunization or you want to give your child one, you then have this wonderful set of results from evidence. But then you also know in your consciousness that some research is created by companies that benefit from that. Some research is created ideologically from materialism. Some research it isn't very good. It's not done very well, or particularly about human beings, it's very probabilistic. It's about probabilities and percentages rather than absolute truth. So then you can feel, what do I feel about this immunization, this jab? Does it feel right? Does it feel good? And part of this work of self-transformation and growth and becoming a true spiritual atheist is to realize that our intuition can be refined and developed. And it's not the same as our instinct, which is usually a fear, like, oh, don't want to have that, or got to have that because I don't want my kid to die. That's not intuition. That's instinct. That's coming from a different consciousness, separation consciousness. For me, intuition is this deep, quiet, beautiful sense that doesn't go away, that something needs to be done by you that's not being done. And it keeps tapping away. It keeps tapping away. And if we ignore it, we don't get the full benefit of our consciousness, which is in some very mystical way, and this is the mystery at the heart of mystical, that intuition is somehow connected to everything, because it's only one reality, remember, one non-dual universe. And we can sense things that aren't necessarily stuff that we've learnt or memorized ourselves. And then we can make choices. So we're not rejecting science, neither are we saying it's the only truth. We're saying we've got some senses and intuition, we've got science, and we've got to make a choice. Do you see also how challenging this is, and why people don't like this truth is because we have to fully own our tough choices. We can't say, well, the evidence says this only, and I just disconnect from my own intuition, nor can we say, oh, I'm a new ager, I'm against immunizations or treatments. We have to discern in the moment, minute by minute, what's the right way forward. Okay, let's talk about love. How does spiritual atheism, how does enlightenment for atheists work for us in our love life? Well, if you're anything like me, you have spent many years in relationships where you were hoping the person you were in love with was going to provide the love that you didn't get when you were a child, the love you deserved. And we call that codependence. And it is a nightmare, and it's basically shooting both of you in the feet, because it's almost impossible to create a sustainable intimacy, a deep intimacy, a lasting growth together with that codependency. So what enlightenment for atheists gives you is you get all the love you need inside for yourself. You provide it for yourself. Because newsflash, even if your parents were around and wanted to and said, I love you infinitely, like you always wanted to hear, they said it every day, every minute of every day on the phone, they called you and said that, it's too late. You've already developed who you developed. So you can only transform your experience of a lack of love, a lack of appreciation, lack of being seen and heard inside through your connection to what all that is, the universe. And as you start to feel the love inside, you don't need your partner to give it to you. You don't need them to say what you want them to say about your dress, or just whether your bum looks big, or whether you're a really useful, wonderful human being, because you get that from yourself inside. And that creates a freedom in your relationships, not just your love life and all your relationships, to truly have people and see people as they are. And when you feel that love inside, you feel safe inside, which means you can open up your heart, take off all those protective barriers around it that we've erected to stop people getting in, like not being committed, like two-timing people, like running our way, like not even asking anyone else out or anyone out. And we can start going, here's my heart for you, do what you will, because I don't need to feel safe from you. I can feel safe from it being inside myself. And that's the essence of what people call conscious relationships, enlightened relationships. Again, that's for another book and another story. But that's why it's so important for love as well. And that's finally, I'm going to talk about leadership. I'm going to talk about leadership of our organizations. I'm going to talk about leadership in the world as a whole. Right now, we have a form of capitalism that's developed, consumer capitalism, which prioritizes profit over everything. And profit is only one part of reality, right? So there's a big explosion in this idea of purpose. And when you understand purpose to actually be spirituality in business, it's the experience of connection, of love, of wanting to heal and help others because they're part of us, that Ubuntu feeling of we're all in this global village of life together, then you can start having purpose make decisions in your business. Purpose can be your boss, not you be the command and control boss, and not everything about the profit and the bottom line. So when your decision about whether you're going to shut down a factory in one place, or build this product, or use this paper, whether it's sustainable paper or not, you start not just thinking about the bottom line, you start also feeling, what is purpose? What does consciousness, my love, connection with the world, my universe, universe I'm part of, what does that want me to do in this moment? And again, you have to make some tough choices, but we have to make tough choices anyway. And I believe through bringing enlightenment into our atheistic modern world, we can recalibrate capitalism, which we can't destroy, it seems, and maybe we don't want to, because we all quite like all this stuff that we get with capitalism. I mean, I've worked in innovation for many years. I love this stuff. But we can start to temper that desire for profit and to sell you stuff you don't really need, and make you feel like you don't have enough stuff because you're missing out of something. And we can temper it with purpose, with connection. And dare I say, yes, love in the boardroom, can shift capitalism into what I call connected capitalism, something that comes from a connected sense, still innovative, still entrepreneurial, still creative. I will never, I hope, not be an entrepreneur. I love it. I love getting up in the morning and doing stuff. But what I love even more is doing stuff that's purposeful, that's contributing to the world in a very meaningful way, that comes from my heart, hopefully to yours here. And finally, when we bring enlightenment into our atheistic world, which is really challenging, because I believe that the last great taboo of life is being spiritual in the public domain, particularly in societies like England, America, France, maybe Germany, where if you talk about spirituality and you're a grown-up in your media, you're in the BBC, you're in a magazine, you're in politics, you're in a big company, people think you're a nutty religious wacko. And so we hide away our hearts in our companies. We're doing mindfulness, pretending it's not really doing anything with our heart. Often it doesn't, it's just about stress relief. And what we can do with this spiritual atheism, without being new age, without wearing ponchos, which I love, by the way, without wearing those to work, without wearing tie-dye, we can bring love back into our companies, which is where a lot of entrepreneurs start anyway. They love something, they love their community, and they want to solve a problem for their community. And we can bring that sense of love and connection back into the political domain. We can make decisions from that place. And then we can let go of this old polarity between left wing and right wing, and we can have a new form of politics. Because, as we know right now, liberal democracy isn't enough, because it's atheistic, it's materialist, it's nihilistic. There's nothing in it apart from iPhones and iPads and AI, and that gets us excited for a little bit, but there's no meaning in it. And so we're searching for more meaning in our workplaces, we're searching for more meaning from our politicians. And if they keep giving us either old materialist capitalist ideas, old communist enforced equality ideas, or at worst religious fanaticism, which is what's happening so much at the moment, we're going to have extremism, political instability and crises, and we might go back to the 1930s again. I mean, the signs are there, right? And as a former Jew, as a cultural Jew, it's alarming what's going on. So it's urgent to bring this experience of love, enlightenment, into our atheistic political space. Please come out the spiritual closet, as I call it, and be bold and say, I'm making decisions based upon my intuition as well as the data. I'm making my political choices based upon what I believe and feel to be the best thing for our society, as well as the evidence and what people are saying. And I'm guided by great feelings of love. But you can call that purpose, you can call that intuition, you can call that something else. We don't have to come straight out of the closet with jazz hands. But if we don't do this, we're going to revert back to these old ideologies which just are not working for our world. So I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. It's been a whistle-stop tour through some of my thoughts. There's a lot more depth in the book if you haven't read it. And I'll be building this idea out in all different ways in the future, and building it out into our leadership work with companies, work with relationships, etc. Thank you for giving me your attention. I hope it's been entertaining. I hope it's been informative. It does come from my heart to yours, in devotion from one small part of this one universe to you, another part of this one universe. Matter, consciousness, always together, never apart. They look apart, but they're not apart. I look apart from you, but I'm not apart. We're all part of one thing, and love is the answer to pretty much every question we have. Take care.